Hi, I'm Dr. Toby Curtis. Today we're here at the South Fork Natural History Museum, and we're going to be talking about sharks. We've been studying sharks here off Long Island for several years, and we're going to learn about all the sharks of New York today. So come along and join me.
All right, everybody, welcome. This is a great opportunity to listen to a lead biologist of our SoFo Shark Research and Education program. My name's Frank Quevedo. I'm the executive director of the South Fork Natural History Museum, and welcome to another edition of our East End Environmental Lecture presentations. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we had Eastern Tiger Salamander Tracking Program with our reptile amphibian specialist, Jake Kushner, which was a great success. He was able to introduce everybody at that program about the radio telemetry tracking of our endangered species, Eastern Tiger Salamander. Then he took everybody out in the field and they went and tracked some of our tiger salamanders. But tonight is a great addition to our presentation. Dr. Toby Curtis is the lead biologist for the SoFo Shark Research and Education program. He's also a wonderful friend of mine. We both graduated from LAU Southampton together. We also have Fish Guy Photos, Chris Paparo here. Sorry, Chris, I had to point you out. He's also a graduate of LAU Southampton. So this is a great organic way of getting together after so many years of all the hard work that we put into understanding the environmental natural world that we are involved in. So, but before I introduce Toby again and have him take over, I just want to let everybody know that on July 19th, our next East End Environmental Lecture Series will be John Himmelman, author of Discovering Moths, Nighttime Jewels of Our Own Backyard. So he's going to be talking about the different moths that are here on Long Island. So it's cool. If anybody has time tonight, we're doing a horseshoe crab survey at Pikes Beach in West Hampton with the New York State DEC. So if anybody has time, 8 o'clock tonight at Pikes Beach, and we're more than welcome to join us. So with that, you're also, I forgot to mention that you're also an adjunct associate professor at Stony Brook University's SOMAS department, which is the School of the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences at Stony Brook. So it's great to have you here, Toby, all the way from Massachusetts, and we really appreciate you being here. Dr. Toby Curtis, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks to Frank and Mel, everybody at SoFo, for the invitation to come speak today. It's a lot of fun. Like Frank said, I've got some deep roots here on Long Island, and even though I live in Massachusetts, it's great to come down and see friends and family down here as much as we can. And it's awesome to go from being a student on Long Island to being a sort of a professional shark researcher on Long Island. And my talk today is going to kind of touch on the last about 10 years of what we've done studying sharks out here and how far we've come in a very short amount of time. So I'll just, I guess we'll start with that. Again, as Frank mentioned, I'm an adjunct associate professor at Stony Brook University. I'm based in Massachusetts, but I'm also been the lead collaborating scientist for the Shark Research and Education program here at SoFo. So everything that you'll see here today is really been supported by SoFo from the beginning. So when we got started, the whole project here kind of really got started focusing on white sharks. And I don't know, maybe a quick show of hands, who's seen one of my talks before? Like, have folks been here I know some folks have been here for some past talks. So I'm going to try to skip over some of the stuff that maybe you've seen before, but we started the project because the South Shore of Long Island is the only known nursery area for great white sharks in the entire North Atlantic Ocean. It's a really special place. And so we've known for a long time, really since like the 60s, that there's a concentration of basically baby great white sharks right off the South Shore of Long Island, but no one had really studied them for a long time. And so we had an opportunity to build some collaborations, and we started out studying these juvenile white sharks. And I'll share a little bit of those results. But that's really kind of what brought the team together and SoFo into the mix, is trying to pool resources to study these little white sharks. And they're born about that size, if you can believe it. That's about as small as a great white shark gets. But there's over 24 species of sharks that live off Long Island that occur here every year. This is just a handful of them. Um, did folks know that we have hammerheads off Long Island? We actually have two species of hammerhead sharks that occur off Long Island, and they're relatively uncommon, but there's not much known about them up here. So we'll talk about hammerheads a little bit. We have spinner sharks, sandbar sharks, dusky sharks, thresher sharks, even tiger sharks, the actual tiger shark with the stripes on it there in the middle. So the bigger ones are like the sand tiger and makos, but we also have black tips and spinners more recently too. So really diverse mix of species here off Long Island, and they've all been kind of poorly studied in this region. Most of the research on a lot of these species has happened historically kind of off the mid-Atlantic or the southeast United States, where a lot of these sharks spend their winter. They spend the summers up here in the Hamptons, and they overwinter off of like West Palm Beach or the Outer Banks. So yeah, exactly. So, but sharks have been grabbing the news a lot in recent years, especially because some of the shark bites have happened in the last several years off Long Island. But sharks are not new to New York waters. This is a clip that fish guy, Chris Paparo, sent to me from around 1984 in the Fisherman magazine. It says sharks come close to the beach during August. Sand tiger and other shark varieties tangled up in a gill net in 15 feet of water off of Gilgo Beach. So this is just to kind of show you that these species have been here a long, long time. It's just that I think now in recent years, with all the advances of technology and our ability to go out and study these sharks, we're just becoming more familiar with what they do while they're here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shark bite risk because that's like the big thing these days. And I'm going to talk about how some of our research can inform beach safety. And so to start with, we got to talk about, what is really the risk of a shark bite? When you hear about sharks, it's one of the first things that comes to mind. I know this is the 50th anniversary of Jaws this year. Great movie, but totally inaccurate about sharks. So these are the numbers. This is the numbers from the International Shark Attack File, which is based at the University of Florida. In the last 20 years, there have been 12 unprovoked shark bites, 0 fatalities, 12 bites in 20 years. By sharks on people swimming off Long Island. So you think about Jones Beach, you think about Rockaways, how many millions of people have been in the water in that time. So you can just see just pure numbers. The risk is very, very small, thankfully. The species that have been involved, according to the official records, are sand tiger, angel shark, actually, white shark, and unconfirmed Carcharinus. So Carcharinus sharks are the requiem sharks, are things like a sandbar, a dusky, a black tip, a spinner, that family of sharks. So sharks are out there in the ocean, right? They're out there doing their thing. They chase their natural food. Most of the sharks here off Long Island are fish eaters. They eat a variety of different fish. Bunker or menhaden is kind of a common bait fish that a lot of them feed on, especially as the menhaden population has started to come back to New York. But they also eat a lot of bottom fish like skates and dogfish and cod and black sea bass and things like that. So the sharks are out there. They've always been out there chasing their natural prey. Where you have shark bite risk is where you have people that kind of get added to the mix where the sharks and the prey are naturally occurring already. And so this little zone here where people and sharks and their food all overlap, where they all overlap, this is where you have the greatest risk. And this is kind of what that looks like. This is a photo from, I think, a couple of years ago. I think this is Fire Island. I'm not exactly sure, but you can see, obviously, people on the beach, huge schools of Atlantic menhaden, and then sharks in the mix. They're there feeding on the menhaden. So this is the natural food chain happening. And when you have that food chain happening right next to a busy beach, that's where your risk of an interaction is greatest. So, but of course, in reality, the sharks and their food are moving around in the environment, right? Like they're not necessarily always right on the beach. They're moving around. It's dynamic. We also know that human population and even beach visitation has increased over time. And due to fisheries management and conservation, sharks and their food, the populations are increasing. So this zone of overlap has been increasing over a scale of the last few decades. There's more people, more sharks, more prey. But we can only control people's behavior in this equation. We can't control where the sharks go, where their prey goes. We can only control human behavior. But we can understand shark movements. That's really what I'll talk about today, how we study shark movements. And so that we can't control where they go, but by getting a better understanding of where the sharks do spend their time can really help inform the risk to beachgoers. So we use three main types of tags, telemetry tags, to study shark movements. We use acoustic tags, which are about the size of a AA battery, and they are actually surgically implanted into the body of the shark. So there on the left, you can see the scientists doing surgery. That tag then pings away for up to 10 years. And the system works like an easy pass system for sharks. That tag is always pinging, and there's listening stations all up and down the South Shore, actually throughout the whole Northwest Atlantic. Different researchers have these moorings with a receiver on the bottom. And when a tagged shark swims by, it logs when the shark was detected there. So it can give you kind of course scale movements, but over a very long time period. The next one is a spot tag or satellite transmitter. These are the ones that groups like OSearch use. These get bolted to the dorsal fin. And when the shark is swimming around and when it gets to the surface, radio signals don't transmit through seawater. And so when the fin is above the surface of the water, this antenna can communicate directly with the Argos satellite system, which is like a NOAA satellite. And we get a position fix on where the sharks are. So that little cartoon there in the middle is actually the satellite tracks from these kind of spot tags on 20 young of the year white sharks, little white shark pups, during the summertime off Long Island. So you kind of see they're ping-ponging up and down the South Shore during the summer months. Here, I'll pass this around. If you want to take a look, just feel free to pass them around. So that's spot tag. The next one is a PSAT, or pop-up satellite archival tag. And this is basically a data logger that archives the depth and water temperature on the shark for a period of time. We generally use tags that stay on for about a month. And it records the swimming depth of the shark and the water temperature every 10 seconds for the month. And then it pops to the surface and it transmits all that data at once. So this is the PSAT, and you can see an example of a vertical profile of the shark kind of bouncing up and down the water column and the water temperatures it encounters during its track. So I'll pass this one around too. Lastly, I won't talk about this one too much, but it's really cool, exciting technology. This is called a CATS cam. This is an HD camera that also has basically like a Fitbit in it, or not like an Apple Watch. It's an accelerometer. And so we get every tail beat, every pitch and roll, and the depth and tail beat frequency of the shark while it rides on. But these stay on for a very short amount of time because they generate a ton of data. So they stay on for about a day. But we get all this super high resolution movement and video from the shark's perspective. So really exciting technology, but that one tag package costs about $10,000. So we only have one. And it stays on the shark. When we let it go, you have to get it back. After that tag pops up, yeah. So who knows where that's going to pop up, right? So we put on a shark, it stays on for a day. Hopefully within a day, the shark doesn't go all the way to Portugal or something. And so we're able to, get this great shark's perspective of the environment and all this sort of high definition, three-dimensional movements. And here's a sand tiger. So far we've deployed these on sand tigers, spinner sharks, white sharks, and thresher sharks. And this is just kind of a snapshot of the data. And just to show you that it's super high resolution, like millions of observations. We're talking like 20 to 30 times per second. It's logging the pitch and roll and acceleration of the shark in 3 dimensions. So really dense data set, but it can give us really great insights into swimming behavior and kind of what they're seeing from the shark's perspective. So from the satellite tracking, this is kind of a summary of all those white sharks, the ones that were ping-ponging around before. This really helped us. We knew the juvenile white sharks were out there, but this really helped us define the bounds of their nursery area. And so just from the last few years, this paper we published in 2021, it's really just the last few years that we've uncovered and really helped define the bounds of the white shark nursery area using these satellite tags. The acoustic tracking has been a more recent collaboration with the lab of Dr. Brad Peterson at SOMAS. And he received funding from a few sources, but mainly from some of the offshore wind developer companies. And Stony Brook is doing a lot of offshore wind kind of impact assessment related research, including acoustic tracking all of these kinds of fish, including several sharks. And so SoFo has been heavily involved with deploying all the acoustic tags on sandbar, sand tiger, and dusky sharks for the last 3 years. And just kind of a summary of the effort that Captain Greg Metzger, who kind of coordinates all of the field operations, and the team that he works with, a couple other captains, but they've put acoustic tags on almost 300 sharks, just of those few species in the last 3 years. So just to give you some idea of like the abundance of shark life that is out there, we've literally caught and tagged hundreds of sharks at this point. And on the bottom, you can kind of see examples from each of those little dots is an acoustic receiver that's off the beach. And so you can kind of track together when the sharks are in proximity of those receivers, you can get an idea of where they're hanging out, how much time they're spending there near the beach. In this case, this is where a cable from the offshore wind is going to come inshore and meet the shore. So they're getting baseline data on how much time the sharks spend there now. And then when the cable comes in and the offshore wind is generating the electricity, they'll be able to see if these patterns change due to the presence of the electromagnetic fields and things. So 50th anniversary of Jaws, we had to throw this in, right? Jaws 3D. So the ocean, unlike most of us on land, it's, we're kind of on a flat 2-dimensional plane here. In the ocean, all the fish live in 3 dimensions. And so the PSATs are really how we get that those 3-dimensional insights, where the sharks are vertically in the water column, not just where they are on the map. And so I talked about the data that they collect, and this just us deploying one of those tags on a dusky shark. So why do we care about vertical movements? Oops. Let the animation do its thing here. So the sharks, the water varies in depth, but they can spend time near the surface. They can spend time near the bottom, somewhere between, or bounce between the two. And it can give us insights into what they're foraging on. If they spend a lot of time at the surface, maybe they're feeding on schools of bunker. If they're on the bottom a lot, maybe they're eating skates and black sea bass and things like that. It's also really helpful for conservation. We can study, based on their vertical movements, we can study about how much exposure these species have to fishing gear. Like in this case, just like trawls, for example, bottom trawls are dragged along the seafloor. Sharks are caught as bycatch in those commercial gears or gill nets, things like that. And so these tags can tell us how vulnerable the species is to being caught in bottom gear or surface gear if it's like surface fishing. Drones have become a big deal. I thought I had a little more animation there, but anyway, drones, spot sharks at the surface, right? But it's hard to know what % of the time any of these shark species are actually spending at the surface, and the tags can tell us that. So this is an example from 4 individual sharks that were tagged with a PSAT. These are 4 white sharks over the same 2-day period. This is 48 hours. And you see the top 3 sharks, this is the kind of their depth profile. They're kind of doing this similar kind of thing. They're bouncing up and down a lot during the nighttime. The dashed lines are the time of midnight. So you can see during the daytime, they're kind of on the bottom and then making occasional visits to the surface. And at night, they're kind of bouncing up and down like a yo-yo. And this 4 shark at the bottom was in a completely different piece of water and was behaving very differently. So you can see even within the same species, depending on where they are, what the environment is like, they may have a different vertical behavior pattern. These PSATs also record the temperature, like I said, and so we can actually use this information to predict how species may respond to climate change and respond to extremes in temperature. So here you can see a shark that was bouncing along. It hit that really hot red piece of water near the surface, and it started diving deeper and needed to cool off. So basically, whatever that temperature is, it's around 25 C or about 80 degrees. That's too warm for this little white shark, and it was avoiding that temperature. So that's kind of a temperature threshold for white sharks. Now to get back to the drones, Fish Guy will tell you, when the conditions are great, you can get some really spectacular photos. And there's a lot of people online, posting drone photos of sharks. But you got to fly. Chris will tell you, you have to get to fly a lot of hours to get good footage of sharks in clear water. Because when you go to the beach out here, is it always that clear? I think it's rarely that clear, right? So the tags can tell us how visible or how often the sharks are going to be visible to a drone. So this is more of a typical kind of drone situation, right? It's kind of murky. It's kind of green. There's some glare. Or even like this, where you really can't see anything, even though there might be a hint of something there, but you really can't see it or identify it. A study in Australia that was using drones or aircraft to sort of monitor shark presence off beaches where there was a lot of shark bites. They actually put a plywood shark decoy out in the water, and they recorded the percent success rate that the helicopter and the airplane had spotting that plywood shark. They found that the helicopter only saw the shark 17% of the time, and the airplane only 12.5% of the time. So very low success rate of spotting a shark, even in shallow water where it should be visible. Now you compound that, this is just a plot of kind of the average water clarity. This is how murky the water is off Long Island. During the summertime, it's 2 meters, about 6 feet, which makes sense. You go to the beach, if you're standing in the water at the beach during the summer, can you see your toes when you're standing at the beach? Like usually you can't even see your toes. So that's a challenge using aerial methods to study to study shark distributions and presence off beaches. So, but we can study how often the sharks are near the surface with our pop-up tags, with our PSATs. So this is a map of 150 sharks that we tagged for this study. That was just published. Frank had printed out some copies. I think they're out by the Shark Shack. There's a couple up here. This just published last week, so it's brand new information we're excited about. So 150 sharks were tagged with acoustic tags that had a depth sensor, and the PSAT that have the depth sensor. And the triangles are where the tags popped up after they were on for a month. And this is what we found for the depth distribution of 10 different species. So we tagged 150 sharks of 10 different species out here off Long Island. You can kind of see the sample sizes are different for some of the species, like the tiger and the scalloped hammerhead. We actually only got one of each. But for things like dusky sharks, we tagged 68, the sand tiger 31, the white shark 15. And you can see that the smooth hammerhead actually on the left-hand side here spent most of the time close to the surface, or was a species that spent the most of the time at the surface. And then it kind of slowly angles down as you go along for these different species down to about 10 meters depth, or about 30 feet average depth for the white shark. So if these sharks are only visible when they're in the top 6 feet of the water column, you can just see from these plots how much is being missed by the drones. So a shark could be near a beach, it could be in 10 feet of water, but you're not going to see it just because of the water clarity and the depth that the drones are capable of seeing down into the water. And because of that, there's this gap. I'm calling this a detectability gap. So this is the chance that a shark may be present in shallow water, but not visible. So this is basically the difference between their time in 3 meters of water and their time right at the surface in less than a meter of water. And you can see it's like 25 to near 50% for some of the different species. So basically, there's a good chance, for a smooth hammerhead, there's almost a 50% chance that it could be present in shallow water, but not visible. And then, for something like a dusky shark or a blacktip, it's 25 to 40% chance. So getting back to our kind of conceptual idea of shark bite risk, we can only control what people do, right? We've been able to study the sharks using our cool tools and our fancy tags to understand what the sharks are doing, but we can't control them. So how do you control people? Can't really control you, but we can educate you, right? We can try to teach you more about the sharks. We can share from the data that we've collected and try to convey that to the public. So it's, so you can maybe make more informed risks yourselves when you go to the beach. And so SoFo, this is, part of SoFo's core mission, right? Is public education. And this Captain Greg Metzger on the right, he kind of leads the field operations. We get lots and lots of students that get to come out in the boat, and it's a great experience. You get to, introduce families and kids to sharks for the first time. They get to see real research happening. A couple of years ago, I even got my son out on the boat, and he got to see his first dusky shark, and it was, kind of a personal highlight for me to get my son out, tagging sharks with us. But we can't get everybody out in the boat, right? You can only take like 6 people at a time on the boat. So we're starting to bring the sharks to the people. And that's why we have started to develop the Shark Shack. This is an idea that was kind of inspired by shark safety efforts on the West Coast. Cal State Long Beach Shark Lab, led by Dr. Chris Lowe, who's like a world-renowned expert on sharks, especially white sharks in Southern California. They have a public outreach program that is called the Shark Lab Shark Shack. And they go out to the beaches in Southern California and they educate beachgoers about sharks. And so they bring jaws and they bring tags and, they have handouts and they answer questions from the public. Is it safe to go swimming? Like, what's my risk of being bitten? So you have scientists that can actually bring some of these facts to the public. So we're trying to do more of that. And so we can share these beach safety tips and talk to locals and answer questions and basically train people to be shark smart, which is really about having personal kind of risk tolerance, like knowing what to avoid. Like if you see that giant school of bunker right off the beach, and you see stuff splashing on it, birds and maybe dolphins or fish jumping out of the water, maybe don't go swimming in the middle of that, because that's a natural food chain happening and you want to avoid that. Obviously, the museum itself here is a great resource. The shark exhibit's fantastic, and we try to use that to help educate the public. Because we've been so successful, with our work, and it's kind of cool, right? Tagging baby great white sharks. We've been lucky to attract some pretty big media attention. We've all been on the national news multiple times. But we were actually invited to be part of a National Geographic special a couple summers ago that we filmed, and it aired last summer. It's called Baby Sharks in the City. And if you haven't seen it, I'll give us a little plug. It's available on Disney Plus. So if anybody's got Disney Plus, you can go home and check out Baby Sharks in the City. And it really highlights the work we're doing. And what we've done was particularly for the white shark nursery and how we study these baby white sharks out here. And so what started out as a very kind of, the small kind of group of friends trying to study sharks, trying to study white sharks out here, which nobody had done. And it's kind of snowballed into this multi-species, Long Island shark community kind of a thing. And we've been able to have very successful reach, and great opportunities like this to be part of a National Geographic production was, a real, kind of a career highlight. So I'll wrap it up here, and then I'm happy to hang around and take questions for a little bit. So, SoFo and our partners that we work with are actively studying the ecology of sharks here in New York. That was our real focus, is about ecology, the biology of these species, when they're here, where they go, what habitats they like. But it also has this, the data can inform beach safety considerations. So we're also sharing the data with beach managers, the safety officials, and fisheries managers too. And so this is all valuable information for the managers in New York. And obviously public education and outreach are critical to everything we do. And so I've tried to tie all those things together, and it's, that's all I've got, but it's been a really rewarding experience. We're doing some really exciting cutting edge research, and, so we thank you all for being here, supporting SoFo, and we hope to continue doing this for the foreseeable future. So thank you very much.
You got a question, just raise your hand. I had a question about the slide that had all the earl on it. About one of the Pacific, no, we'll go sharks. But that one Pacific shark is very in the
So, with all the photos?
Yeah.
Yep. Here we go.
What's the bottom right shark?
That one is a black tip. It's a black tip shark.
That was all I wanted.
Okay. So black tips and spinner sharks are very, very similar. A lot of times they're misidentified as one another. The funny thing is that the spinner shark actually has more black tips than the black tip shark does. So the spinner shark has a black tip on the anal fin here, and the black tip shark does not. And that's one of the main ways you can tell them apart. But they're more of a southern species. They mainly hang out off Florida and the Mid-Atlantic, and they become, with climate change, they're becoming more and more common up here off New York during the summertime.
Have you noticed a relationship between the more endangered species and more less any more towards the surface? Have you noticed if the species is more endangered for do you have no overlaps?
So so the relative sort of how threatened the species is, and if if their depth makes them more vulnerable somehow. It's a good question. So we have the sharks that we've studied. There's a mix of species, and they have different sort of conservation statuses. So that's an interesting question, though. So the sand tiger is a prohibited species, and that's on the far right side. White sharks are also a prohibited species. You can't catch them. But Dusky is kind of right in the middle. Dusky's in that same sort of conservation bin. So I think this is more biology driven, but I guess you could argue that the sharks that spend more time at the bottom could have a higher risk of bycatch in commercial fisheries that fish on the bottom. But most of these species are actually, at least in this region, are recovering. They've been rebuilding for last decade plus, because the regulations on shark fisheries have really clamped down in the last 30 years. So even white sharks, sand tigers, duskies, they're starting to recover, which is good. But they'll still get caught as bycatch, accidentally caught by fishermen. And where they are vertically can impact how vulnerable they are to to that bycatch. But I don't see any real. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's any real pattern in like connecting the depth to the actual sort of conservation status. It's kind of a mix.
How do you data on like the survivability of the return of the baby white shark that are eating?
That's a great question. So we've tagged. We've had, I think, one of the ones that we tagged, we know had a mortality several days later. So that's one out of like 30 something baby white sharks we've tagged at this point. And so handling, and in that case, there was an issue with the, we kind of stick a hose in their mouth to irrigate the gills. There was like air bubbles in the hose, and it wasn't great for the shark in that case. Most of the other sharks, I don't think we've had any mortalities out of those, like out of the 150 sharks in this study. I think maybe one or two, including that white shark. So it's, the survivorship is pretty high from the fishing event. It's really hard to know, like at an annual level when they migrate, if they come back. The pop-up tags are only on for 30 days. But that's one of the things with the 10-year tags we want to look at to see what % of them are returning year after year. And that data is there. It's like available now. So that's kind of it's a great question. And we definitely would like to look at that some more to see how many survive the annual migration, right? Because they should come back and be detected on those receivers every year if they survive. So, yeah.
Do they all have teeth?
They all have teeth.
Do they
Right.
all have like 10 rows where when they lose one, they eat?
Yeah, so all these sharks, they can have very different shaped teeth, but they all have the same kind of functional kind of system where they have multiple rows. I think there's a few shark jaws out in the Shark Shack out there if you want to look, but their jaws are like a conveyor belt of sharp teeth, and you can see multiple rows kind of all at once. So the forwardmost row is called the functional row. But when that tooth gets chipped or broken off, the next one behind it will just kind of rotate up. So even though the sharks have different shaped teeth, they all have the same kind of system.
And I read or found out recently that it's the white shark.
Because we're a nursery, right?
Yes.
So you could mention that. Because we're one of
three in the world.
Correct.
That when the mother gives birth, she gives birth to 25 to 30, and she doesn't, like, I don't know if all the shark species don't show their babies what to eat. Like a whale keeps their baby for a couple years.
Right. So that's why they have the nursery. Like the nursery habitat itself is supposed to provide some protection and lots of food. That's the idea. So there's no maternal care in sharks. Mom shark doesn't teach the babies how to hunt. They're on their own from day one, so it's all instinct. And so hopefully a mom has dropped them off in a place, and we don't know where the white shark pups are actually born. We think they're born nearby somewhere, but we don't actually know. But the pups show up this time of year every year. Every May, June is when we start seeing baby white sharks off Long Island. So they're born somewhere nearby. But the water's warmish during the summer, and there's tons of food for a small shark, including small dogfish and skates and all the other things I mentioned. So it's a very good habitat to be baby shark, like kind of near shore off Long Island like this. So yeah, good point.
I'm curious, on one of the slides you had had some disparity between how many sharks you had caught versus how many you had tagged. And I was curious what was causing the disparity, and also if it was sex-based at all, if it was like, we have a lot of, or like we're focusing on maybe female sharks, we're focusing on male.
Yeah, so in this case, the total number of sharks caught was all the species, like of the dozen species that we catch. But for the acoustic study, we're only tagging the 3 species, sand tiger, dusky, and sandbar. So in 2022, we tagged 82 of those 3 species. Everything up to the 131 was other sharks, like other types of sharks. So the white sharks, the hammerheads, the black tips, things like that.
Like qualifying, are you focusing primarily on sex or age or anything like that?
No, it's just the species level. So and most of them, I'd have to look at the data, but I think it's a pretty even mix for most species. It's like for most of them, it's a good point because a lot of sharks they separate by sex. So the males hang out in one place and the females in another. But we haven't really seen that here off Long Island. It seems like it's a good mix of males and females for most of the species. Yeah, Frank.
A couple of weeks ago, there was drone footage of a large white shark off of Montauk, close to the beach. Can you enlighten us a little bit about what your thoughts are and what that behavior was all about?
Sure. Yeah, there's some great coverage on that topic in the East Hampton Star. Can quote some people in the room, maybe. So I don't know if folks saw it, but there was a large white shark that a drone pilot spotted out off Montauk. Was it just last week? So this time of year, basically May, is a time when larger white sharks are migrating north to their sort of summer feeding grounds. So large white sharks, like I'm talking like 10, 12, 15-foot white sharks, the ones we want to avoid. They spend their summers off of Cape Cod, Maine, and Canada, and they're kind of migrating past New York this time of year. And so it's not unusual that the shark was there, but it was just kind of the first time that somebody with a drone happened to catch one swimming by. So it's a common thing that nobody should be surprised that a white shark was seen off of Long Island in May. But it's just cool to get that there's so many people flying drones now that you're more likely to capture one on camera. Yeah, Chris.
You talk a little bit about longevity of some of these species.
Yeah, good point. So I don't know if folks know, but like a white shark can live to be 70, 80 years old, maybe longer. The sand tiger, I think same thing, like 50, 60 years. What else we got? And they have, very few pups, compared to like another fish that lays like thousands of eggs. They only have 12, 2 dozen pups at a time. And sometimes it's every 2 or 3 years that they have one litter. And that's why overfishing has been a problem for sharks, is that once they're depleted, it takes a long time to rebuild that population because they live so long and they only have a few pups at a time. So what other species are in the mix that I can maybe think about there?
They're not really short-lived, though.
Yeah, like how long they live varies maybe by decades, but all of them live a long time. Like for a fish, they can live like, 20, 30, 70 years in the case of the white shark. So it's really kind of crazy to think about. Yeah, Jim.
We're seeing here an ever-increasing number of seals. I mean, it used to be all hopper seals, but now there's a lot of gray seal mixed in. So will there be a time when these adults start to feed in our area, as opposed to just migrating through?
It's possible, and that's kind of what's happened in Cape Cod as the seal population has recovered. The white sharks have been migrating out there for decades. Like I said, these sharks are, they've been around longer than the seals have recovered. But when there becomes a kind of a concentration of enough seals in one spot, the sharks will smell that and they might start hanging out there a little more. And that's what's happened at Cape Cod, is the sharks that were kind of cruising past Cape Cod in the past, they now know that there's seals on the beach and they kind of concentrate in that area. They're feeding there. They're feeding on those seals. But another important piece is temperature. Adult white sharks kind of like the water temperature around 70 degrees. If it gets too warm, it gets what, like in Montauk, for example, East End, where there have been some seals, some gray seals on the beach, it gets pretty warm in the summertime, by midsummer, and it's a little too warm for the big white sharks. They might pass through, or they might try to take advantage of it in the spring if the seals are there, or in the fall when they're coming back down, like October. And that's the time I'd be most concerned, is when the water temperature is more comfortable for the big white sharks. But in the peak summertime, thankfully when most people are in the water, I think the water near shore is too warm for those big white sharks, even if there are seals present. So who knows how many more seals will come back to Long Island. But hopefully it'll end up too warm for the big white sharks.
Have there been any studies about sharks' immunity? Isn't it true that they can pretty much eat anything and not become ill? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, sharks have excellent immune systems. They're not totally immune to everything, though. It does take a lot to get a shark sick. They do eat a lot of things, but they do get cancer. There's sort of been kind of a misrepresentation of past research that the sharks don't get cancer, and they sell like shark cartilage pills as like a vitamin supplement that can help fight cancer. And there's no evidence that actually does anything, because sharks actually do get cancer occasionally, but their immune system is just very strong, even compared to other fish. So they're like very tough. They're very resilient animals.
So are there any other sharks that are producing here, and are they all like live birth sharks, or are they like
So all this, we have a lot of skates here, and skates lay eggs. Like a mermaid's perch on the beach is a skate egg case. We have chain dogfish offshore, right? Would chain dogfish be the only egg layer hit along the beach?
Well, but they're way offshore.
They're way deep.
They're like 6+ feet.
Yeah. So all these sharks give live birth. But we don't know, most of them, we don't know where they actually pup. We just know that the young ones show up here. So dusky sharks are another example. Most of the ones we catch are little. They might be young of the year, kind of like the white sharks, but we don't know exactly where they're born. Just that New York is kind of a nursery area for them, like it is for the white sharks. And in some of the bays, we get sand tiger sharks and stuff too, South Shore. So there's like little pup sand tigers that hang out in Great South Bay and other places in Shinnecock.
A few years ago, I was with my daughter in Santa Monica, and they have piers like 500 feet out. At the end, these guys caught like a 5-foot shark. And one of the guys, tough guy, cut off the dorsal fin and threw the shark back. So there must be laws. I think Japan used that as an aphrodisiac or some jazz like that. So there must be laws in the U.S. that they can't mutilate a shark.
Correct. Yeah, so that's very much illegal now. So shark finning has historically been a real problem for shark conservation. Shark fins are used to make shark fin soup in parts of Asia, China, Taiwan, Japan. And there's a global trade in just the fins of the shark. So the fins are very valuable. The rest of the shark meat, not so much. So finning was a common practice decades ago, but that's been banned in the U.S. since the 90s. Yeah, so that... Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely illegal. It's like, wouldn't be allowed. So if that's something their fishing game should be looking into if there are reports of that kind of thing. But yes, it still happens. People do it. Some people in Asian communities, they like to make their own shark fin soup. So they might catch a shark, keep the fins and make their own shark fin soup. But it's shark fin trade has actually been banned in the United States. So you can't possess shark fins or even import them into the U.S. anymore.
Are all sharks solitary or do they go in groups?
Yeah, some sharks definitely travel in groups, like the spinner shark, the blacktip shark. They school in big numbers. Like here, you can see our school of spinner sharks. So those fish have been traveling together for who knows how long, but then they do these mass migrations. This group may travel together all the way down to Florida for the winter and then back up for the summer. We don't really understand how long they stay in a group or in a school. But a lot of the other sharks we study, white sharks, sand tigers, they're much more solitary. So it really depends on the species. Yeah. But it's kind of cool when you're out there and you see like a school of spinners. We see a big school like that swimming by the boat. It's pretty impressive to see these bullets flying through the water.
I got one more for you, Toby. Just so maybe you can add this, because it comes up with me a lot. There's too many seals. There were no seals in the 80s. Now there's too many seals. We need to call the seals. Which again, not going to get that. But I also now am hearing there are too many sharks. Because conservation, we need to start culling sharks. Do you have any talking points, thoughts, something about that? Because it seems like sharks and seals are at that same level these days, right? As far as too many. Close.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there. So there's perception, especially among a lot of fishermen, that there's too many sharks. What I would say is that the science says that there's more sharks than any time in the last 20 or 30 years. The conservation is catching up. These shark populations are rebuilding. So there are more sharks, but too many is a very subjective thing. And what we haven't got to, some of these sharks, like the dusky shark, yes, there's more of them. They're rebuilding, but they still have another like 80 or 90 years of rebuilding ahead of them to get back to their kind of historic abundance. So what we're seeing now is only a fraction of where some of these shark populations should be. The other part of that is that just indiscriminately killing more sharks isn't necessarily a solution. If you got sharks taking your other fish off the line, there's other things, there's other types of research on shark deterrence and things like that are going on that hopefully help prevent shark depredation, like sharks stealing your other fish, your black sea bass or your cod or whatever, before it gets back to your striper, before it gets back to the boat. We can have more sustainable shark fishing. So there are fisheries for sharks. People do eat sharks in parts of the world. Shark meat that is landed legal in the U.S. can be exported to other countries. And so we can harvest more of the sharks, consistent with the scientific catch limits and things like that. But just culling sharks, same thing, just culling seals is not an actual solution. That doesn't actually do anything. So you need to come up with sort of coexistence type solutions. And for sharks, deterrence is one of them. There's some new magnetic shark deterrents, electronic shark deterrents are being tested right now. And hopefully those show some progress, because you could just put a little electronic thing or magnet on your hook and it deters sharks, but allows your kind of target species to stay unaffected. And that way you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can keep your fish without killing more sharks. So it's a very complicated topic, but there are more sharks, but saying there's too many sharks is kind of not where we're at. Is that consistent with what you've been kind of messaging, or like it's a tough question? There's a lot going on there.
Your opinion, because I get that question a lot, and I have my answer. I didn't have some of the other end stuff there, but yeah, there's just like with the seals, you always get there's too many. Well, the people that say that we eradicated gray seals from the U.S. So because they're here now, doesn't mean they weren't historically here. And I guess that's kind of where I was getting at too with sharks is historically, yeah, they've been here. It's just because of conservation, there are more now than there were, say, in the 80s.
Right, in anyone's memory.
Right, memory. Just like whales and dolphins.
Right.
And stuff. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Do you have a hypothesis about what the cables from the windmills, what kind of effect that will have on the sharks?
It's an open question. It's a great question.
See, that's why you're doing
Right.
research.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think ask us in 5 years. It's a great question, and there really has been minimal research on that question. The fact of the matter is that these cables are putting a lot of voltage from offshore into the grid. They're generating sizable electromagnetic fields around the cables, but we don't know if it hurts the shark, if it attracts the shark. There's some cases where telecom cables that are subsea, they actually are attractive to sharks. The sharks will bite the cable. We don't know if that's the case, or if it'll, if it hurts them, or if it'll just deter them. It's kind of like hitting a force field, and they don't like it and they swim away. That could vary by species too. Some species are just biologically more sensitive to electromagnetic fields than others. So we just don't know. And hopefully in the coming years that we're actually studying that question, and we'll know more. We're going to find out. Yep. Some of I forget about Long Island. Is the power on South Fork? I kind of forget the status of the different projects, but it's coming soon. Yeah, Block Island. And there's been some studies with skates, and lobsters actually at Block Island. And they showed that there was not a harmful effect, but that the skates would kind of dig in the sand a little bit over the cable. They could sense it, and I think they were attracted to it. They thought there was food buried in the sand. Yes, sir. One more. We'll get the last one.
So, out of all the hundreds of sharks that the program has tagged and caught and tagged over the years, has there ever been a recapture of a tagged shark
No.
Never. So just to give an idea of the abundance.
How many sharks are there?
Yeah.
We've never recaptured?
Never recaptured a shark. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is incredible.
I think one sand tiger had been previously tagged, and that's we've tagged almost 70. Other groups have tagged 100. There's only been one recapture. So just to give you an idea, there's so many. Yeah, one more. Yeah, go ahead.
What would you say is your preferred or most successful method of tagging?
It really depends on the tag. I really love the pop-up tags, the PSATs. I love the data we get from those. We get the really pretty, these pretty 3D or vertical plots, the depth and temperature. And they're really quick and easy and pretty painless for the shark to put in. We just pop it in under the dorsal fin, we let it go, and that's it. So it's quick, doesn't require surgery or suturing. Like the acoustic tags are great because they last so long, but you actually have to do the surgery on the shark, and that can take some time and add stress to the animal. So I really love the pop-up tags, and they're just popped in externally. I like that. Quick and easy, and then you just wait for the data to get emailed to you.
You fall around the beach, you get $100.
Yep. Yeah, and so every fall, after the tags start going out, when they pop up, they wash up on the beach. If you find one on the beach, $100 call up Frank. He'll give you he'll yeah.
Anyway, just to include outside your Shark Shack, that's the scientific publication for everybody to grab, the most recent scientific publication that Toby's blew so hard on. There's also some handouts, some stickers, SoFo Shark research stickers. There's also little toys, little shark toys that kids can take home. So just visit the Shark Shack before you leave because you want to grab some more information about our work. Other than that, thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
Okay.